Hello, everybody. I'm Josh McHour. I'm the co-founder and director of Stanford Biodesign, the Musalem Center for Biodesign. Welcome to tonight's Innovators Workbench. As you've probably noticed, there's a theme for this year's Innovators Workbench. We're really taking the opportunity to highlight our people. We bring luminaries from the outside, and we just realized this year we actually have a lot of luminaries just right here, folks that trained and were part of our program we're so proud of, and tonight is no different. Tonight we're really featuring someone very special, as we have previously, Dr. Michael Ackermann. So Michael is a 2010-11 fellow, one of our first alumni to really innovate the biotech space utilizing the biodesign process. 5-time founder, 2 IPOs, 2 acquisitions, and a most recent company that you'll hear about a little bit, I'm sure, Osani Bio. Also the director of biotechnology here at Biodesign. So really when we sort of took a relook at our curriculum and realized that biodesign process could be used broadly for any technologies, and began our sort of all life science effort in those verticals, Michael was the leader of our effort in biotech. And so we're really thankful, and we're already seeing fruits of that work play out in our fellowship with a couple of really exciting projects that are making progress. A little bit about our moderator, Lynn Dennand. Lynn is a phenomenon. I think you know that she is the power source behind Biodesign's academic programs, which basically is biodesign and everything we do. Lynn is just an amazing partner, collaborator, teacher, leader, organizer, visionary that has enabled our textbook and the biodesign guide online, and just about everything here has Lynn's fingerprint on it, and we're really thankful to have Lynn leading the discussion and the interview tonight. First, a shout out to Wilson Cincini, Goodrich, and Rosati to thank them for the support of this evening and the reception afterwards. I want to remind everybody to silence their phones, as I'm going to check right now and make sure mine is silenced as well, and it is. And welcome Michael Ackermann and Lynn Dennand. Take it away.
All right. Well, thanks for coming, everybody. It's great to have such a nice crowd here, and I am really grateful for the opportunity to lead tonight's session. I've been a big Michael Ackermann fan for a long time now, almost a decade, I think, is when we met. And it's been really fun to prepare for tonight's event, and we've got a lot of content to cover. So I'd like to just jump in if you're ready to roll.
Perfect. I also just want to say thank you so much, but a sincere pleasure and honor, and great to be interviewed by a dear friend. So.
Awesome. All right. So getting started. You grew up in Kentucky.
I did.
Tell us a little bit about your family and what you were like as a kid.
Yeah, so I grew up in a household with my parents and my sister Mandy, with whom I'm still very close, and I think by any reasonable metric had a pretty good childhood. Kentucky was a good place to grow up, great place to be able to get outside and play in what we called the woods, and catching fish in the creek, and backyard sports, all that kind of stuff. It was really sort of the quintessential, be home before dark, and that was really nice because it really gave me a chance to learn some independence and some confidence as a young person. As I was sort of thinking about and reflecting for today, I feel like so much of my career story has been about role models and mentors and people that I've really had in my life, and at that time in my life, as for a lot of us, but role models come from family, and both my dad and my dad's dad were role models. My grandfather was an electrician, but also an entrepreneur. So he he hung up his own shingle and created a company installing neon signs, and I always found that pretty inspiring as a kid. But also was really emphasized sort of love and caring and empathy, and I feel like that's something that really made an impact on me as well. My dad the same. He was the first in his lineage to go to college and became a physician, and I found that really inspiring growing up, and also just someone else who emphasized care and love. I had the opportunity to go to the hospital with him a couple of times, and he seems like he knew like every custodian's name and whatnot, and that that left a real impression on me as well.
Excellent. And it seems that you were also entrepreneurial from a very early age. Just tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, I think my mom, who she was really responsible for sort of sitting me down and actually making sure I did my schoolwork. I think in retrospect, I didn't really fully appreciate this until now that I'm a parent and I see what it takes to get my son like to sit in a chair for for 30 seconds. And that was, she really did that for me, which was amazing. And she reminds me that I guess my first venture, I was actually selling candy out of my desk in elementary school. And I really kind of always enjoyed negotiating and deal making. In high school, I had a close friend of mine, another role model, whose his father was an entrepreneur, and this was my first exposure to a technology entrepreneur. He was involved in the early days of vehicle emission testing, and saw someone who was able to scale a business and actually make impact on the world. In this case, environmental, but it was really inspiring. And that friend, Jeff, and I had a number of our own little ventures. We had a car detailing business. We had a car stereo installation business. I think we're solely responsible for a spike in hearing aid use in Louisville. So.
Well, that is a good, car stereos is a good segue. So we were trying to think about a way to make this a little bit fun. And so what you may or may not know is that Michael's actually a musician and also a music lover. And so there's a little thread we're going to pull throughout the interview. So back in high school, when you were installing car stereos, tell us what you were listening to back then, and also just about your first band.
Yeah, so I was a pretty nerdy kid. I arguably still am, and it was kind of in my like angsty teenager phase, and listening to a lot of hard rock, Tool and Nine Inch Nails, and really like playing a lot of that music as well. So just getting all those feelings out in a small room with loud volume, and that band was called Relative Tranquility. I think that was our relative to what, I'm not sure, but it was.
Excellent. All right. So after high school, you headed to Vanderbilt for college. You studied bioengineering, initially on a pre-med track, at the urging of your parents. So tell us about the college experience and how you ultimately decided you were more interested in becoming a scientist than a doctor.
Yeah, so I think I wasn't necessarily disinterested in being a physician. I really valued the idea that you could do something to help other people with your career, and so that was really compelling. I think my parents were trying to figure out how I could actually make a living, and I think like, you should be a doctor. Like, no, really, like you'll love it. And so I really liked projects. I liked building things, and so I thought biomedical engineering, great way, we'll marry the two. And my first semester freshman year, I think the physician thing pretty much ended. I was in a freshman seminar class, and again, sort of pulling the thread of some people who were generous enough to invest time in me. This seminar class of 7 people, biochemical engineering, and it just blew my mind. We were reading papers. I didn't even know what a scientific paper was, and I was like, what? You mean like the latest stuff's not in the book? And it was like, no, it's... And the idea that you could use math to model molecules and things, it was just really kind of mind-opening. And he invited me, his name was Bob Tanner, invited me to do research in his lab. And so I, as a freshman that I'm sure was doing a lot more harm than good at that point, worked there in his lab for 3 years. And somehow was able to get even 2 first author papers as an undergrad. I mean, it was just a really special experience and a big deal. And so when it came time for the MCATs, and I luckily had the grades where I could have done that. Decided to take the GRE instead. And I do remember my dad, who in retrospect supports my career decisions, but was like, yeah, I guess PhD would look pretty good on a med school application. It's like,
He's not giving up.
That's right.
That's great. All right, and then you also had the chance to pursue your entrepreneurial interests at Vanderbilt. So tell us about that.
I did, yeah. It was, gosh, I was really into circuits at the time, and electrical engineering. I had found myself into the electrical engineering capstone design class my junior year, and this MBA student came in afterwards, like a very MBA student thing to do, and was like, hey, if anybody wants to start a business, come talk to me after class. And I was like, yeah, I want to start a business. That sounds cool. So I talked to this guy, and he's like, oh, like BME, awesome, like healthcare is hot, let's do this. And it actually, in retrospect, was so naive because we didn't have the biodesign textbook that I think actually would have, made this so much more fruitful for us. We didn't have, the skills or the network, but it was just had so much fun. I mean, we went on our own little version of needs finding. We knocked on the door of a bunch of doctors in the hospital and called around and would, hey, got any ideas? Got any problems that need solving? And a couple of things that we looked at, sort of an implantable device, energy source, and also a sudden infant death syndrome monitoring device, and had some prototypes that never worked, and really. Again, didn't really have the network or the skills to get there, but had an awful lot of fun with it.
All right. And importantly, musically speaking, what stands out about your college experience?
My during college, my musical palette was pretty pretty plain. It was I did pick up the 6-string guitar. There was a girl that I was interested in at the time that was into that, so that was motivating. But I was mostly listening to college rock. It was kind of OAR and Guster and Fish and all that kind of stuff. So.
All right, excellent. All right, so next up was the PhD program. So tell us how you chose Case Western Reserve University and how your interests kind of continued to evolve during that period.
Yeah, I mentioned I was pretty into circuits at the time, and I had read this Wired magazine article on a bionic eye. And in retrospect, kind of an oversold notion, but it was really inspiring. It's like, oh my gosh, they're stimulating the retina and restoring vision, and I think they even had a picture of this guy behind the wheel of a car, and I was like I want to do that. I want to what could be cooler than sort of mirroring circuits with talking to the nervous system. And at the time, and arguably still, Case Western, really had the the largest nucleus of neurostimulation, neuromodulation folks there, and so. Yeah, I had just a great experience there. I again had some very important mentors that were generous enough to kind of guide me and teach me how to be a good scientist, but also gave me the opportunity to explore some creative ideas and sort of let me make mistakes and all those things that we would hope. And so I had still had the entrepreneurial bug. It was there. Had an idea at the time for a deep brain stimulation device and entered it into a local business plan competition that was not healthcare focused. And my friend and I won this competition, and we're like, now what? And they were like, I don't know, So, the entrepreneurial part, kind of felt like a pipe dream at that point. But really, I know it's a lot different at Case now. I think they've got a really great program. Yeah, just really learned how to be a good scientist and really enjoyed it.
All right, great. So as you were nearing the completion of the PhD program, you were enjoying academia, but sort of curious about industry. And so you managed to convince your advisor to let you go and intern at Boston Scientific in their neuromodulation division in LA for about 3 months. So what did you do there, and what were your sort of big takeaways from that experience?
Yeah, I think part of that is that I had an advisor that actually let me do that. I mean, I think that was a pretty unusual thing. I mean, I'm towards the end of my tenure where finally all the money he had been investing in me was actually paying off. I could actually do things, and he let me take off for 3 months and just go to California, and that was a really really great experience for a lot of reasons. I was probably the most annoying intern they've ever had. I mean, I knocked on every door and every cube, and I probably met 200 people. I was like, what do you do? And what do you do? And what do you do? And so just kind of soaked up all as much information as I could. It ended up being a pretty pivotal few months. I mean, I learned that academia was unlikely to be my path forward. It was we were working on products that were actually going into people, and that felt really compelling. Two, I also realized I probably didn't want to work at a big company. Boston was going through a big quality restructure at that time, and it was really challenging. And I also met my now wife and became motivated to get to California for an entirely different reason, and applied to biodesign.
All right, excellent. So before we leave the grad school era, tell us what was going on musically.
Yeah, that was actually a pretty relative high point for music. Was I had some friends who were playing a lot of music, writing a lot of music, and I was a pretty deep indie rock phase. So I was enjoying going to a lot of shows, and kind of going way down the indie rock rabbit hole.
All right, excellent. Oh, and another band.
Yeah, another band. So we're a bunch of neuroengineering grad students, and I was really for any neurostim nerds in the audience, was really trying to convince everybody to name the band Balanced Biphasic, which is a particular term, but we ended up going with Srinath Sadak, and I'm convinced that the reason we didn't make it big was because of the name there.
All right, so lucky for us, you heard about the Biodesign Innovation Fellowship while you were attending BMES and decided to pursue that as a next step. So what was being a fellow like for you?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's so many people in the room who were a fellow. And I look back, I mean, just what an incredibly rich and pivotal and intense year, right? I mean, it's for me, it was partially learning the biodesign process, and it was very inspiring and also very humbling. I mean, suddenly you're surrounded by all of these people, at the center and on campus and in the valley at large, that have really impacted the world in some really important ways. And it was very it was inspiring too to think, oh my gosh, maybe we can do that, and to have the people that are there to really help invest in you to help do that. Had just a really terrific fellowship team, many of which are still involved here. I see Garrett Smith in the audience, and Vic McRae, Brandon Falcons, and just a really great group of people, and a lot of late nights in this very room, actually.
Awesome. And listening to what? Tell us about the soundtrack of the fellowship year.
Yeah, of course. So Garrett set the soundtrack that year. That was mostly electronic dance music, high energy stuff to keep us going into the wee hours here. So.
That's awesome. All right, so that takes us up to completing the fellowship, and this is a good opportunity, I think, to sort of start to dive into a few different themes here. So, when we're teaching the biodesign innovation process, we really emphasize the importance of getting the need right as a critical first step, and also that the way you characterize the need can really make a difference in terms of the direction you take a project and the solution you ultimately bring forward. So you have a really great example of this with your experience in the area of dry eye disease, first with Oculeave and then with Oyster Point. So maybe you can tell us that story.
Sure. So like every fellowship team, we were assigned to work in a clinical area, at least primary focus area. For us, that was ophthalmology. And one of the needs that our team identified was a better treatment for dry eye. And we found that through observation. We saw a lot of people that were coming in with complaints, and weren't getting enough efficacy out of the primary prescription treatment and OCT treatments at the time. The physicians were primarily cornea or cataract surgeons that are taking care of these patients, and it's taking chair time from potential surgical candidate. And being a tertiary care center, we saw some really severe cases as well, where people's lives were really meaningfully transformed from having this condition, and became really compelled by it. So we went through the process, and we're fortunate enough to be guided to an idea there where the idea is we were going to electrically stimulate the lacrimal gland to increase tear production, kind of like a small little pacemaker. And we really evolved that through the fellowship year, going from paper prototypes and all the way to something that was starting to get some head nods. And speaking of sort of like important moments, and also people that happened in this room, and also people that took a chance and on me in my career. I remember sitting in that desk right there, and being on a phone call with Brooke Byers, and him telling me that he would actually he and Kleiner Perkins would make a seed investment in what became Oculeave, which was really sort of a life-changing moment for the company and for me. And what I think is interesting is this same need, sort of had an evolution in terms of what the right product was, and I think at that time we were thinking about something that was implantable. It was kind of an injection type device, and lots of war stories there about how we finally got there, and early testing, but. We ultimately built that device. We actually treated about 20 patients with it, and learned some important things in that process that actually kind of read back to the need, which it was working well in some patients, not well in others, and it was dependent on placement. It was also a procedure, and we were doing more talking with physicians who were treating dry eye, and realizing that some of the really severe cases we saw here at Stanford actually probably weren't as representative of the population at large. And the VP of R&D and I, Jim Loudon at the time, were in Mexico eating some spicy tacos, and had this sort of epiphany moment where you put spicy stuff in your nose, and your eyes watered, and it was like, okay, like. Maybe there's an alternative physiology that we can tap here. and allowed us to do this in a way that was really non-invasive. And so the second iteration of the product here was basically a handheld electrical stimulation device that stimulated the nose and upregulated this parasympathetic tearing pathway. And it really read on the need a lot better. It was something that was appropriate for more mild to moderate patients. It was something that didn't require a lot or any surgical finesse, right? And that product worked really well clinically. So the data looked great, and on the basis of that, we were acquired by Allergan about 10 years ago, and the product was approved, a device called TrueTier, and perhaps the reason you haven't heard of it is because the launch didn't go exactly as we hoped it would, and I think really speaks to sort of that that read on the need. What worked really well is clinically. It was a really effective device, but it didn't quite meet some of the other pieces of the need that we, in retrospect, knew back in the Stanford days. It was, I mentioned all the chair time that it takes. Instead, there's nothing easier than writing a script, right? And instead, now we're asking a practice to train somebody how to use something. It's like the time went up, not down. It was also something that was kind of funny looking and something that was a little unusual for people to put into their nose. And so ultimately, something that didn't have the commercial success that I think we were all hoping for. But fortunately, we had an idea that was much better aligned with those needs, and that was a pharmaceutical nasal spray that would leverage that same pathway, and that was something that we spun into a company called Oyster Point Pharma, and basically started this new little NewCo focused on that, and that was really my first foray into biopharma. It was something that ultimately is a lot better solution for that need, and something that's treated hundreds of thousands of patients now.
Yeah. Great. So let's keep going with Oyster Point. So you were sort of a pathfinder in applying need-driven innovation principles to biopharma innovation, and sort of tell us about your philosophy and what made you kind of confident that this could work. Biodesign could work in the biopharma space.
Yeah, at first, credit where it's due. I think John Pederi actually was the first to start a biopharma company using these principles out of biodesign. But seeing John do that, and also seeing the fit here really helped me to really lean into that first project there. And I think in the context of biodesign, it fits very naturally. I think as Josh was mentioning earlier, it's really a cross solution space, because the things that we do best and the things that really is kind of the core of biodesign, it's getting the need right, and it's really deeply understanding all of these different customers. It's it's the patient, but it's also the physician, it's the FDA, it's the payers, it's the broader clinical care environment, all those that are involved. And if you think about it, that really has nothing to do with whether or not that's a device or whether that's a drug or a service or anything else. And I think, like anything, you get into it and you realize it's not as complicated as it looks on the other side. It's even rocket science isn't rocket science kind of thing. And so the biopharma stuff is really it's quite approachable. And so I personally have used those biodesign principles across 3 companies now, and I think part of what's really exciting for me is that now that we're bringing that here to biodesign into the center, this is our 3rd year of teaching, and really I would say it's almost kind of arming the fellows with biopharma as a potential solution, and it's amazing. There's been really compelling ideas, each year, and I look at some of the ideas that the teams have, and it's like, yeah, like that could be a really cool drug. And these are people that don't have any biotech training per se, and candidly, neither did I. Yeah.
All right, good. So your next company, Tarsus, provides a good example of what need-driven innovation looks like in the biopharma space. So maybe you can tell us what that roadmap looked like in getting Tarsus going.
Yeah, so it really starts with my co-founder, Bobby Azamian, and I happened to be on a panel together, and we knew one another. He was at Versant, and made one of the, helped with, see Charles in the audience as well, and it was also involved in helping to get the early capital into Oculeave. And so we knew one another from that. And Bobby and I decided to get a beer afterwards, and we're like, we ought to do something together. Let's, we kind of went on our own little needs/project finding effort together. And a need that had kind of been marinating in my head a bit was a better treatment for blepharitis. And for those who aren't familiar with blepharitis, it's an inflammatory condition of the eyelids. It can be really uncomfortable, and it can impact vision. And we're seeing a lot of it in dry eye. We're screening these patients out of trials because they have it, and there's a lot of them. I was at a conference one year and walked by a poster. It was something that had like something that looked really disturbing on it. It was like this parasite, and it was like what in the hell is that? And I stopped and I looked, and it's this thing called Demodex, and I was like, what is that? And literally, it's this little 8-legged mite that turns out lives in your eyelids, and if you have Demodex blepharitis. And it feeds on the sebaceous oils around your eyelashes, feeds on the meibomian oils on the which is a critical part of the tear film under your eyelid. And I was just like, man, like that can't be good, and so like I brought this back to Bobby, and I was like, hey, this might be like a totally crazy thing, but like there are these bugs that are living in people's eyelids, and like he's like, yeah, that sounds pretty druggable, and I was like, it does sound pretty druggable. And so so we really started digging into the need, and it turns out that the majority of blepharitis cases are actually caused by this mite, and we had to get some of that information ourselves, like literally seeing what the percentage of patients walking into an eye care clinic that have this, and it's north of 50%. So it's pretty darn common. So we were getting the pieces of the need there, but also very importantly, learning some lessons from the dry eye space, and really thinking pretty hard about like, what do we need to do to make this product fit right, and thinking about the patient, thinking about the clinician, and out of the gates we're compelled to make this be a prescribed pharmaceutical. But also something that was a really as form factor friendly as possible, which is an eye drop. And that sounds really trivial, but you've got these bugs that are living inside your eye, and the most natural way to get rid of them would be to have constant drug pressure with putting an ointment or a cream on your eye. And looking into it and taking that really seriously, talking to physicians and and would-be patients, it was clear that people don't want to put a bunch of goop on their eye, right? And they want to use what's comfortable, and drops twice a day sounds reasonable. If it's a lot more than that, it's going to be harder. And that really guided us towards the types of chemistry that we would need to be able to have something that was potent enough, had the right physical chemistry to actually want to reside in the spaces where these mites lived, despite only momentary application a couple of times a day. And so, that team is doing an amazing job. The drug launched 6 quarters ago, and I think they're getting close to 250,000 patients treated already. And it's something where I think was really it's the foundation of that need that that really drove that and drove the right product there.
Do you want to tell the Mandy part?
Yeah,
so it's funny part of the story.
Yeah, we're talking about family, and it's so one of the little aha moments there. My sister Mandy is a veterinary dermatologist, and it turns out that something that happens in dogs called mange is also caused by these same little bugs. And so I was like, all right, it's like eyelid mange, you got mange on the dogs. Like, I called her up and I was like, Mandy, my friend and I, we're working on this project, and if we come up with an eye drop that does this, maybe we could partner. Like, this could be an animal model, right? And maybe we could put some eye drops on some mangy dogs and see if it goes away. And she's like, I would, and we used to see a lot of mange, but there's this new flea and tick medication that just came out, and it's honestly, it's kind of eradicated the mange. I don't see it anymore. I was like, what do you call it? How do you spell it? And it turns out it's this really, really beautiful chemistry called the isoxazoline class that's just remarkably potent, lipophilic, and works really well against this target, and put us in a position to actually license a molecule out of Lilly at the time that we were able to leverage.
Just goes to show you never know where those connections are going to come.
That's
right?
exactly right.
Yeah. All right. So I really enjoyed hearing some of your thoughts on leadership as we were preparing for the session. And as someone who's launched 5 startups, you're obviously doing something right. So tell us a little bit more about your leadership style and sort of what's important to you in that regard.
Yeah, what a nice question to be asked. Thank you. I think maybe generally speaking, I tend to be a very future sort of vision-oriented person and leader. Very goal-oriented, biased towards action. We got to make decisions with imperfect information. Also, work to be empowering. There's hiring people that are, nearly everybody that is on the team is better than me at whatever it is they're doing, and empowering them to make those decisions. As I was, reflecting on that question, I think there's something else that's very important to me that I'd like to bring up, which is just leading with empathy. And I normally I would, it's something that feels sort of obvious, but I just want to bring it up and be explicit, because I do think there's some romanticization of kind of a strongman style right now, and I'm sort of seeing it, corporations large and small, and certainly there can be, people can be effective in that. We've certainly seen that, but I would like to just say, in my experience, being empathetic, in particular for businesses of innovation, it's really critical, and it's part of the process is having empathy in the patients that we're hoping to treat, and the physicians that we're hoping to treat, and really being able to stand in their shoes to build a product. But it's also really important for the team, right? I mean, these are, I think nearly everyone that I've ever met or had the privilege of working with is doing the very best that they can with the circumstances that they have, right? And being able to have step into those shoes for a moment, in my experience, really brings the best out of people. It makes people feel brave about having the dumb idea and talking about it, right? It makes people feel brave enough to share data when it doesn't look good, right? Or to say, hey, the timeline is, I don't know, like it doesn't look like we're going to get there. Like I know it's not what you want to hear. So I think if I was to sum it up, it's like, you don't have to be an asshole to win. So I think, and
all right, well, let's, well, actually, before we go to questions, I know you're keeping things a little bit quiet still about your current startup, but what can you tell us about what you're working on at Osani Bio?
Yeah, so I'm having a ton of fun. Sort of back to the early days. We're focused on treating age-related macular degeneration. So this is the #1 cause of blindness in the developed world, and it's a really tough disease. So there's 2 phenotypes, wet and dry, and the dry side is really pretty woefully undertreated right now. We're trying to fix that. So it's early days, but I think we've got some good ideas, and we're having a lot of fun with it.
All right, great. Yeah, let's take a couple questions. Stunned silence. I'll get us started. How are you? How do you move so fast? I mean, it just hasn't been that many years, and you've done, these 5 companies and done them well. So,
yeah, I don't know if that's a good thing. It just means I'm doing a lot of things, or have been doing a lot of things. So that's part of Osani is really just trying to focusing on one at a time, which I think there's some real value to that. I think also starting in the device world actually has been, I think, a real strength because there's some things that device innovators do incredibly well. It's prototyping, it's rapid iteration, it's getting information and, along the way instead of waiting for some big binary event. So I think there's a lot of ways to be able to do that in terms of identifying what the risks are, and for example, using, if there's a mechanism, I'll use the example of tarsus. Like there's some early days where it was like, gosh, if we treat these bugs, is the blepharitis going to get better? Well, we weren't in a position to be able to use this novel chemistry at the time, but we were able to put some really goopy stuff on people's eyes, and it was not a product. It never would have been, but allowed us to answer some really important risk-reducing questions at that time.
great.
Okay, so you've been a part of several design teams. What in your experience has been the aspects of it that make them the most successful? Like if you're making a new team, are you picking people who really care about the problem? Are you picking people who really love all the parts of the design process? Are you looking for great variety and perspectives? What is your go-to for best design team ever?
Yeah, great question. I think the team at Osani, I think that's we got it nailed. I think for me, and actually this is just, I'll just also mention that I think there's actually a lot of value in diversity in teams, right? And I see some of that, sort of unfortunately going out of fashion. Having that diversity of thought and diversity of background around the table, come up with a hell of a lot better ideas, right? And being able to work, and actually it's something I learned through working with my Bobby Azamian at Tarsus. Just it's the first time that I had worked that closely with a physician, and his brain works so differently than mine. But I think being able to work together, like having that diversity of thought, actually added a ton of value. I think about our team at Osani now, and really just having the creativity and being able to really, people that can understand that there are going to be hard challenges every step of the way. Literally, it's like every quarter there is some impossible thing that's either going to kill the company or it's going to make everything great. And it's just what it is. It's every quarter it's just going to happen. And people that really sort of have that orientation, but and thrive on it, right? And it's like, all right, like hell yeah, let's do this. So I think it's a bit of an attitude, but it's also having the diversity of background there as well.
Hi, I'm Kate Liebelt. I work at Genentech Roche. And my question goes back to a comment I think you made. A lot of folks, it resonated with quite a few folks, which is you don't have to be an asshole to win. And that made me think about the importance of thinking about values and shared values and your incredible journey trajectory as you think about the partners, the investors, the large corporations that you've interfaced with. What are some of those maybe tells, signs that you look for? You can share values on a PowerPoint or Google presentation, but how do you know when you have aligned values with the organization or the individual you're working with?
It's a great question. The short answer is sometimes you don't know until somebody's already on the team and you work with them for a while, right? So I think you can do your best, and I think we all sort of build some pattern matching and just being human. But I think you can also screen people, and a question that I didn't always ask in interview process, but something I ask now is, tell me about your values. I mean, you could just ask explicitly, and oftentimes people tell you, and you could feel if it's something that resonates or doesn't.
I was curious, how do you decide when the time is right to leave your current project or venture and move on to something else? Because obviously, for your current project, the job is never finished, right? You can always do better.
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, I think part of what's inherent to only being at Osani right now is I have left some of these other roles, right? And I think for me, every company is different, but I think it's also having self-awareness of where I think I am best, and honestly, something that that resonated for me was hearing Josh Mackauer once say, like, I'm an early stage guy, like I'm good at it, that's what I do, and I'm really good at it, and that's okay, that's that's my sweet spot. I'm like, yeah, that's okay, and that's where it's fun, and that's where I'm best, and sure, there's things that get left on the table. You don't have some of the same experiences of growing something, trying to grow a company into something huge, but also that's you have an opportunity to create more and in different ways.
So it's very interesting to hear how you went from devices to biopharma. But when we generally consider the pharma, it's considered very hard because of the regulatory hurdles and stuff like that. So how do you navigate through that?
Yeah, it's a good question, and I what I would say is devices are really hard, and there's a lot of regulatory hurdles, right? So it's not fundamentally different. It's a different set of rules, but they all make sense. And I think the biggest leap that I've realized, and it's really sort of in working with the biodesign fellows, is that a lot of people can come up with solutions when they can visualize it, right? And that's why devices feel approachable, because you can see a balloon, and you can see the thing it's supposed to go into, and you can visualize it. Molecules aren't that different, right? But we can't see them with our naked eye. It's not intuitive. You can't just intuit some pathway, right? But you can draw it on a board, and you can connect all the pieces and the pathways. It's like, hey, all right, let's just map out the entire body. We want to have this one, thing go up, and it turns out there's the liver does some things that impacts it. The gut does some things that impact it. Like, the spleen does some things, and like, you can start drawing all these things on the board, and you can go in a layer deeper, and it's like, okay, like, what is the liver doing? Like, okay, here is a hepatocyte, a cell in the liver. Like, what are the pathways in there? Like, draw a picture. And then at that point, it actually becomes really approachable, because now it's like, all right, here's this one little thing inside of this cell type. Like, we wanted to do less of it. And it's like, all right, turns out there's a whole set of tools out there. It's just like, if you want a nerve to do less of it, you could burn it, you could cut it, you could chemically ablate it, something like that. There's a whole set of tools out there for the biochemistry as well. It's like, you want a molecule, you want to inhibit a molecule. You could inhibit it directly with a small molecule inhibitor. You could bind it up with an antibody. You could have the cell create less of it with a interfering RNA. You could cut the gene out with with gene therapy. So depending on what the need is, right? One or other of those tools might be more appropriate or more effective. But I think I believe that most people, when they sort of crack it open, it's like, oh, that's it. It's like it's actually not that complex, and I think a key part of it is just being able to visualize it.
Sounds easy when Michael talks about it, doesn't it?
Thanks for sharing. Actually, following up on that questions, what do you think is the biggest challenge and also the biggest lessons as you transitioning from the medical device area to the biopharma?
Yeah, so the biggest challenge transitioning from device to drug, I think for me is that it's the device, in the device world, it never works when you start, and then it always at least kind of works like somewhere along the way. Like, you can keep iterating it, right? I mean, you can keep making tweaks, you can keep making changes. I think to some extent you can do that in the drug world too. So I think that's an important thing to note. But there probably is a little bit more of a binary outcome that happens at some point, where a key difference is that a device, even if it's an implantable, it's only impacting local tissue typically, whereas a drug can kind of go everywhere, at least in theory. And so I think there's a little bit more of a binary piece that can happen there, and less opportunity to iterate, I would say, especially in the later stages. So that's probably the biggest challenge.
Sweet. Thanks, Michael. You guys are always telling all the fellows to be scrappy and resourceful. So I was wondering, I know you got a lot of stories, but like from the early days, when you didn't have enough money and maybe you didn't have the fancy equipment, if you could tell us a story about, putting that into practice, especially in the drug world.
Yeah, buy me a beer someday and we'll tell you some of the stories. But I think, the early stage prototyping stuff, I would just think about it in the context of prototyping, right? I mean, no one even pauses to think that you can prototype a device, right? It's like, of course you're going to prototype the device. Like, like, even if that's like a 3D printed thing, like, or it's made out of cardboard, right? Like, it's just intuitive, like, of course we're going to do that. And the drug world's the same. So I mentioned the idea of using tool compounds, right? Or it's, hey, like, it's a drug delivery thing. Like, can we actually fit all of the drug that we would need, to deliver this thing for a month inside of the space it needs to go into, right? It's like, all right, like, you can pencil that out. You can do it, do the math on that. Also, prototype formulations. So it's, it doesn't have to be the final drug to be able to, to go and get some really meaningful data to see, if the mechanism actually holds water. So, and I think that's something that the drug world, frankly, doesn't do enough of, and I think that's something that the device world does beautifully well. So I think there's some learning in general for the field there.
Of course, the need determines the best solution type, but do you
That's
see
right.
yourself as a biopharma guy, or could you envision doing more device projects in the future?
You know, I would say, I've done both, and I'm like somewhat agnostic to it. I think, for right now, I'm probably more on the biopharma side, just because it's,
You're on a roll.
I just happen to be enjoying that more, and it's something new and newer and new avenues to learn. I think that hopefully Josh will fix all the reimbursement problems in the device world, but it's there's reimbursement is challenging everywhere, but it's really challenging in the device world right now. So
I think we have one more.
Here. Hi. Thank you very much for sharing your experience. It's truly inspiring. I'm Rahul. So in the process of building 5 startups, with your experience, what is your take and challenges in building affordable products, and someone being early in the process in search of problem statements? Should I think about affordability in the back of my mind while looking for any problem statements or solving a solution? Could you give your take on that?
No, it's a great question, and I think the short answer is yes. And I'll put it in the context of maybe a couple of different settings. I mean, first, just even in the world where people have good insurance, there's pressure on pricing, right? I mean, you don't have to go further than the Wall Street Journal to see that that healthcare dollars are getting tightened, right? And so things really have to be right side up and creating value, with a medicine or a device. But I think I would encourage you also to think about it in the equity setting as well, right? So for those that don't have access to good care, and that's to good coverage, and I think that's in the U.S., that's beyond, and that's frankly something where I think some certainly a large subsets of drugs can actually be really compelling. And because oftentimes they're very inexpensive to make. And so for example, there's no better value than a generic drug. I mean, I don't know how many lives have been saved by generic Lipitor or something, right? And also, in the setting of being in a company, and if the leaders are sitting around the table thinking about how to set pricing and how to provide access programs for those that don't have good coverage, not every company does it the same. And there's some, being at that voice around the table and being willing to speak up and talk about what we do for not just the people that can pay the top dollar for it, but what we can do for everybody.
Wait, Josh, one more very important question. Got to bring it back to music, right? I'm sure everybody is dying to know, what you're listening to now.
I've been going down kind of a weird progressive rock rabbit hole. So I listen to a lot of... and Cocomelon, yeah, of course, that's right. So in addition to Cocomelon, Rush, yes, a couple of other more modern bands as well, Mars Volta, some others. So.
Well, that was awesome. Thank you, guys.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much. And while Lauren is bringing up some gifts for you guys, I'll just say, Michael, we are so proud of you, not only for your tremendous successes, but for the way you've done it. Seriously, outstanding job. I found that inspiring, and I loved your discussion of what inspires you, because that's why we're here, right? It's about turning those lights on, and then the impact of this conversation to imagine the impact it's going to have on everybody else. So thank you for sharing yourself with us and for teaching us all and showing us the way. Thank you. So I will just say also thank you to everyone who, for Lynn, fantastic job today. I want to thank Deja Hill for coordinating these amazing events. Thank you. And also our amazing team. So Danny, Megan, Linda, Jill, Megana, Lauren, Antia, Susie, and Molly. It takes a village. The Biodesign Village is strong, and you're really feeling it tonight. So follow us on LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube. If you are not on our mailing list, sign up on the news and events page so you can get invited to more events like this. I'll just mention we have one more Innovators Workbench this season. It's April 16th, and we have Todd Brinton coming. Todd is currently the Chief Scientific Officer at Edwards, and one of his most recent companies was just sold to J&J for $13.1 billion, so you don't want to miss that. And once again, thank you to Wilson Sonsini, Goodrich Rosati. Thank you all for coming tonight, and congratulations again. Thank you for being here.